Hi, in this lesson, we're going to look at some things regarding paper 4 of your GCE N-Level English examinations. Paper 1 deals with writing, paper 2 deals with comprehension, paper 3 deals with listening, and paper 4 deals with oral examination. In this lesson, I will bring you through the components of the paper, as well as look at some of the key things that oral examiners look out for when they are assessing you during an oral examination. And this lesson will end with me sharing with you some final tips for the oral examinations. This lesson is quite heavy because there's quite a bit of processing for you to do on what constitutes good reading and what constitutes good answers in the spoken interaction section. So be prepared. If you need to take a break, please pause the video, take a quick nap, maybe 1 or 2 minutes, shut your eyes and continue watching the video. Please make sure that you listen carefully to what is being spoken to make the full use of this teaching video. Now for school-based exams, it wouldn't be exactly the same thing. So like for example on the screen on the laptop, you wouldn't see certain symbols and all that, but the general structure is the same. There will be a video that you're watching, and later on I'll tell you what the video is about. Okay, so components of the paper, you have watched the video and you have heard, right, that there is a reading aloud. For example, this passage that I've shown you here, I'm showing you here on the right. This is actually a sample passage from one of the past year's N-level oral examination papers. So the reading aloud section basically consists of a passage that you have to read. Usually the passage given is at least 4 to 5 paragraphs long. So what this really means is that you have to be used to reading you have to get used to reading for longer periods of time. And can I just say that when you read aloud, when you read a passage for oral examinations, it is not the same as when you're speaking to your friend. You don't read the way you speak, and I don't think there are a lot of people out there whom I know who speak like they are doing an oral examination. So it feels a bit unnatural in a way, but that's how it is meant to be. Okay, I'll talk more about that later. Something to note is that when you are scanning the passage, right, the topic or the issue that's highlighted in the passage is usually the same as the video. Okay, and of course the video is part of the spoken interaction section, so you can sort of predict what the video is going to be, right, based on the passage. But of course you can just skip the passage and check out the video first. So this is what the reading aloud section requires you to do. So once you're done reading, what you'll be required to do is to watch the video again. And by the way, the video is also known as a stimulus. Okay, you should be quite familiar with the word stimulus by now. In writing, you have your visual stimulus, you have your graphic stimulus, an image or a text or a poster or an advertisement, right, or an article that sparks your thinking stimulus. So once you're done with the reading aloud section, you watch the video, like I mentioned, and that commences the spoken interaction section. Now, what I'm showing you here on the screen are sample questions from one of the past year's papers. So you notice that there are 3 questions that will be asked. Okay, and these 3 questions will be on the same topic or issue as shown in the video and has talked about in the passage. So that's that similarity there. But of course, it's very, very hard to really predict all the 3 questions that are coming out. But you can be assured that the questions will be about the same topic or the same issue. If you take a look at the sample questions that I'm showing you on the screen, I don't know whether you realize this, but each question increasingly gets more difficult. So, for example, you look at the first one, it says, what do you think the atmosphere was like? So you have to imagine, okay, it's very personal, right? And then the second one is also quite personal, but it's no longer about the video. It is about the topic that is highlighted in the video. Okay, I cannot remember the event in the video. I think maybe it was a sports game or something. Right, the second question is slightly more difficult because it's no longer about the video, but it's about the same topic. And the second question, you notice that there's a second part to it. Why? It may not always look like that, but increasingly it becomes more difficult. And of course, adding off with the third and the most difficult question, I like to call it a global question, but basically what it means is the third question always requires you to think larger, to think bigger, beyond yourself, beyond your immediate sphere of understanding of the world, right? And think about what other people might think, how other people might be affected, right? So on and so forth. So in this case, they're asking you to think about the good or bad things about being a top international sports star. Right, so this is the structure of your spoken interaction. Video first, questions, and then they will always ask you one question after another. After you're done with each question, they'll ask you the first question first, you answer it. Once you're done with it, then they'll ask you the second one, and then the third one accordingly. No examiners should ask you all three questions at the same time, okay? I know that because obviously the teachers in school have been oral examiners, and that's what we're instructed to do. Also at the same time, we are instructed to use exactly the same words given by Cambridge in the questions when we're asking the candidates the questions, right? Okay, let's zoom into the second part of this lesson. So we have covered the first part, which is basically talking about the components of the paper. Second part deals with the key things that oral examiners look out for. And I will talk about what are some key things that oral examiners look out for the first section first, which is the reading aloud section. So the first thing that I want to talk about with you is to do with volume. You have to read loud enough, okay? I'm not asking you to shout. It's very weird if you shout the passage, okay? Unless there's a small part of the passage that requires you to actually read it in at a higher volume. Sure, go ahead. Okay, maybe there's an exclamation mark. Maybe the passage is about somebody rescuing someone, and then the person shouts, "Help!" Right? Obviously, you can do that, but obviously you're going to say "help," and you're not going to shout at the examiners. It's really weird. It has to be loud enough. So it cannot be too loud, but it cannot be too soft as well. You cannot expect your examiners to lean in and put their ears to your mouth to hear what you're reading. Okay, the thing about volume is this is often underestimated. If you read too softly, your examiners cannot hear the way that you pronounce the words. They cannot actually give you a fair grade. And the reason why I say fair grade is because I believe that you can read well, and if you don't read well and loud enough, they cannot tell whether you are pronouncing the words accurately, for example. So you have to make sure that your reading volume is loud enough. Okay, is loud enough. A good gauge would be for you to put two tables in front of you, right? Two school tables in front of you. Get somebody to sit across you and read a passage, read a sentence, read something. And if the person cannot hear you, right? And of course, it is definitely in a enclosed environment. It's a quiet environment. There's an exam setting for you. If the person cannot hear you, you're not loud enough. Okay, so that's a good gauge for you to test whether you are loud enough or not. And obviously, if you don't have a friend, I mean, of course, I believe you have a friend, but if you really don't have a friend on hand, like with you, and you need to do that testing, what I suggest you can do simply is to put your handphone 2 tables away from you, and then read. Okay, read, and then if your phone can capture what you are saying, I think that is a good gauge. So that's the first thing. Second thing I want to talk about has to do with accuracy of pronunciation. Is your pronunciation accurate? Obviously, this means that when you look at a passage, sometimes there are certain words that you may not know how to pronounce. During an actual examination, there's no way you can pick up a dictionary or go onto the internet to search for the correct pronunciation. There's not a place for that. That's why before the actual exams, before your actual N-level, you should have checked out, right, many N-level oral passages and familiarize yourself with some of the more difficult words that have been tested before. And then hopefully during your actual N-level, your actual oral examination, the passage that you get would be manageable for you. So accuracy has to do with the actual pronunciation of the words in the passage, right? So what to do, okay, when you are stuck and during an actual oral examination, there are some words you're not too sure of. Do your best. You can break certain words up, okay, and try to use the spelling and figure out the pronunciation, even though pronunciation is actually not dependent on spelling but more on the phonetic symbols. Okay, for this you can check out the dictionary online to find out more, right? If you were to search up any dictionary, even online or in the physical dictionary, you will find that beside the word that you're checking, there will be some symbols. Actually, those are what we call phonetic symbols, right? Okay, anyway, accuracy of pronunciation. Okay, don't be distracted by the speaker A and speaker B. They're not goals. They're going to be played later on, right? Accuracy of pronunciation has to do with whether you read every word. Okay, I emphasize this. Are you reading every word in a passage fully, right? And the key word here is fully, alright? Or are you shortening some words in their pronunciation? So let me give you an example of a sentence, okay, that speaker A and speaker B, even though it's the same person, will read for you. And I want you to listen carefully to each of the speakers and decide for yourself whose reading is actually better. It can be quite deceiving. They may sound very much alike. If you cannot tell the difference at all, if after like 10 times, I think it's likely that you yourself might be at risk of not reading accurately. So let me play for you speaker A and then speaker B later on. Speaker A. Alex had arranged to meet up with his friend Lee at 3 o'clock. Okay, that's speaker A for you. I can play again. Alex had arranged to meet up with his friend Lee at 3 o'clock. Okay, and this is speaker B. Alex had arranged to meet up with his friend Lee at 3 o'clock. Okay, speaker B again. Alex had arranged to meet up with his friend Lee at 3 o'clock. Alright. Now, if you had listened intently, you would notice that speaker B was more intentional in reading every word fully. Okay, so if you want, you can play back the video and then listen to speaker A and B again. Okay, I can just do it here for you. Alex had arranged to meet up with his friend Lee at 3 o'clock. Okay, notice the words that are underlined and italicized in the example in purple for you. I want you to notice whether the speaker pronounced those words, right, or each word actually fully. The reason why certain words are highlighted is because they are ending with what we call consonants. They're ending with T's, the EDs and all that. The examiners are going to be looking out for this, whether you pronounce them clearly or not. Okay, so listen to speaker B. Alex had arranged to meet up with his friend Lee at 3 o'clock. Okay, o'clock. So all those what we call consonant endings, right? These are what we call consonant endings. Consonant endings, they are all clearly heard. The T's and the K's and the EDs, make sure you do that. And the S's as well. Make sure your S's are fully read and pronounced. Third thing that the examiners will look out for has to do with whether you follow appropriate pauses in your reading. Okay, pauses. I hope you know what a pause is. Like, okay, I just did a pause, right? After asking, I hope you know what a pause is. Okay, pause means to stop, right? So, generally speaking, after reading each sentence, okay, and usually a sentence ends with a full stop, sometimes it ends with an exclamation mark or question mark. After each sentence, there should be a short pause. A lot of students, they don't do that. They just want to, it feels as if they just want to get it over and done with, which is sad because actually they can do really well in oral examinations if they want to and practice hard enough. So after each sentence, don't be in a rush to read the next sentence. Okay, have a short pause. Now I emphasize that it's a short pause. Don't have too long a pause. Okay, how do you know whether it's long enough? You need more practices. Okay, now there's a difference between ending a sentence and ending a paragraph. If you have read a paragraph, okay, you should know what a paragraph is. Okay, a new paragraph is indicated with a empty space in between. Okay, after each paragraph, once you're done with one paragraph, there should be a longer pause before you move on to the next paragraph. Okay. Now, the last thing that I want to highlight with you that examiners look out for in a reading aloud component has to do with intonation. Okay, don't be daunted by a seemingly big word like intonation. Intonation actually comes from the word tone, tone, right? Tone, okay? And I'm pretty sure you know what tone is, right? If somebody is angry with you, the tone that they use, or somebody is upset with you, the tone of their voice will be different. It's very intuitive, you can tell, okay? Tone. So when you read a passage, right, you're not using a monotone. If you read a passage in a monotone, even like Siri on iPhone or Google Assistant, they don't use a monotone to reply you. Now, if you do that, then needless to say, you won't do well. Okay, because the examiners would just think that there's no expression in your reading. So what exactly are we looking out for intonation? Now, there are two parts to this, okay, because there are two key areas of intonations I want to bring to your attention. The first area has to do with whether you vary your tone of reading, right? Is it monotonous or is it varied? Now, varied comes from the word vary. Vary means make it different, right? Is it the same or is it different? Okay, but I know the word different is very broad, but I'm gonna give you some examples, okay? Or is the same tone applied throughout? So, same thing. I have an example sentence here. I'm going to play A for you and B. Hopefully you can tell the difference. Alex went up in the high-speed elevator. There was no sign of Lee on the top level, so he bought himself a coffee and went across onto the observation deck. Now, so you notice that this person managed to pronounce the consonant endings quite well, right? Observation deck, went across. So all those things are good, right? Okay, let's listen to speaker B. Alex went up in the high-speed elevator. There was no sign of Lee on the top level, so he bought himself a coffee and went across onto the observation deck. So I think you should be able to tell the difference quite clearly. Speaker A sounds a lot more monotonous, sounds a lot like, the example sentence is being read in a monotonous way. Speaker B tried to vary the tone of reading. So I will play for you the readings again. I'll play speaker B only so that you can look out for the words that I've highlighted in purple for you and see how speaker B intentionally emphasize on those words in purple. Now, during an oral examination, you cannot bring out a highlighter and highlight words. It has to be done in your mind. Okay, it has to be done in your mind exactly what are some words that you want to emphasize, right? So it's completely up to you. Alex went up in the high-speed elevator. There was no sign of Lee on the top level, so he bought himself a coffee and went across onto the observation deck. Alright, so the other parts of the example sentence, they are read in quite a regular tone, right? But some words are emphasized. So this is what I mean when I talk about varying the tone of your reading. Okay, the second part to do with intonation has to do with whether you follow the punctuation used in the passage. Okay, punctuation, you should know what it is. Commas, full stops, exclamation mark, question mark, those are punctuations. Generally speaking, if there is a comma in a sentence, the rising tone should be used. Okay, what is a rising tone? I just use it. A rising tone. Tone should be used. Rising tone. And if there is a full stop, okay, the falling tone should be used. Okay, what if it's question mark? Question mark should be what we call a rising and falling, but don't have to confuse yourself with it. Actually, question mark can be practiced easily. Like, for example, what did you just say? Alright, there's a rising and falling, okay, question mark. Exclamation mark is just exclamation. Hey! Right, that's an exclamation. But generally speaking, when there's a comma, the rising tone should be used. When there's a full stop, right, the sentence is coming to an end, the falling tone should be used. So same thing. You can see here that example sentence for you. I'm going to play speaker A and B for you. I want you to listen carefully for yourself. Has to which speaker manage to use a rising tone and a falling tone when necessary. Okay, so rising tone, comma, falling tone, full stop.
The weather was clear, and the view across the city was amazing. In the far distance, beyond all the buildings, you could see the sun shining on the blue sea. The traffic far below could not be hard at all. Alex watched two large white birds fly slowly past below him.
Now, in terms of accuracy, this speaker is quite good. Okay, but it is monotonous, right? It's very clear. Okay, how about speaker B? Let's listen to speaker B.
The weather was clear, and the view across the city was amazing. In the far distance, beyond all the buildings, you could see the sun shining on the blue sea. The traffic light far below could not be hard at all. Alex watched two large white birds fly slowly past below him.
Right, could you tell? Could you make out the falling tone? When the sentence is reaching a full stop, there's a falling tone. But where there are commas, there's a rising tone. Okay, I'm going to play speaker B for you again and you listen to it carefully for yourself.
The weather was clear,
Clear?
and the view across the city was amazing.
Was amazing, falling
In the
tone.
far distance,
Distance,
beyond all the buildings,
buildings,
you could see the sun shining on the blue sea.
on the blue sea.
The traffic light far below could not be hard at all.
Falling again.
Alex watched two large white birds fly slowly past below him.
Below him. Okay. Now, this takes a lot of practice. Okay, because in the initial stage of trying to read properly, by observing the rising and falling tones when necessary, you may find yourself reading a bit too unnaturally. Okay, like maybe you would say, I don't know, start reading like, the weather was clear and the view across the city was amazing. I don't know, okay, in the far distance. Now, all this is part of practice. The more you read, the more natural it will become. Okay, now I know that at the start of this lesson I mentioned that when we read a oral, spoken reading aloud passage, it is unnatural. What I meant was the way that you read is actually not the way that you talk, right? For example, many of us, we don't actually fully pronounce every word that we say to our friends. We often shorten those words, and that is actually normal. That is actually okay, right? And you won't be penalized for that during a spoken interaction if you were to shorten and combine words. Okay, there are certain technical words for that, but don't have to know about that. So, but the more you practice, the more natural you become. Alright, so I've highlighted for you the punctuations. I'm going to play speaker A and then speaker B again for you, and I want you to listen carefully on how speaker A did not actually observe the tones and how speaker B tried to observe the tones.
The weather was clear, and the view across the city was amazing. In the far distance, beyond all the buildings, you could see the sun shining on the blue sea. The traffic far below could not be hard at all. Alex watched two large white birds fly slowly past below him.
Okay, actually this one, high at all, there was the falling tone. It was quite, I think, difficult for speaker A to hold himself back from reading it properly. Okay, so let's listen to speaker B.
The weather was clear, and the view across the city was amazing. In the far distance, beyond all the buildings, you could see the sun shining on the blue sea. The traffic light far below could not be hard at all. Alex watched two large white birds fly slowly past below him.
Okay, so I really hope you can tell, you could make up the rising and falling tone part, okay, where the commas and the full stops are. This will really help you in your reading. Okay, so Now, after this entire lesson, you will practice using 2 actual sample N-level past year questions, and then I will test you and assess you individually. Okay, so come back to this slide if you need to later on. Okay, so we are done with reading aloud. Okay, so we have talked about volume. It has to be loud enough, not as soft as a mouse. Okay, it has to be accurate. Your pronunciation has to be full. Make sure you read every word fully. Don't skip over the words. Make sure you give every word its full pronunciation. I know I'm emphasizing this, but this is something that will really mark you out and set you apart from other candidates who don't read properly. Pauses. Are you rattling? Are you trying to finish the entire reading aloud passage as quickly as possible? That's not going to do you well. That's not going to be good for you. Okay, so make sure you observe the pauses necessary. And last but not least, we have talked about intonation, rising and falling tone, varying the tone that you use in your reading. Okay, let's quickly look at spoken interaction. The first thing that I want to talk about that examiners look out for when they're assessing you for spoken interaction is whether you answer the question directly. Now, just a quick recap. Spoken interaction is where they ask you 3 questions, remember? And before this, there's a video that you watch, okay? And don't forget, you don't have to memorize even the details in the video. You don't have to memorize. You're not required to recall details in the video or even especially what is spoken, right? Oftentimes the audio is not as that important, right? It's more the image. Even though the audio sometimes, like say, if they were to show you fireworks, you can hear the sound. It does make a difference. But anyway, what I'm trying to say is the video, don't have to memorize it, just watch it. Know that there is going to be the topic that they're going to talk about, and they may ask you to give a response to what you watch in the video in the first question. Okay, so that's all you need to know. But don't have to memorize anything in the video. So coming back to this, first tip to do with spoken interaction, are you answering the question directly? So listen very intensely, very, very carefully to the examiner's question, very intensely, and I mean every word in the question. Don't get the question wrong. The teachers, including myself, we have been oral examiners before, and oftentimes I see candidates, of course in other schools, I see candidates getting questions wrong. Even if it's just 1 or 2 words, they thought they heard this, but actually it was something else. Examiners, we will have to bring you back to the original question if you were to digress. But why actually wait for that? Why not listen to the question carefully and make sure you answer the question directly? Now, how do you do that? You can do that by making use of the words in the question to actually answer the question. I have mentioned this before in class. This is something that you do for writing as well, right? In the bullet points, I've often asked you to use the words in the bullet points for functional writing and all that to answer it in your work. So for oral examinations, same thing. The questions that they ask you, memorize those questions. Memorize every word in that question. Okay? Memorize means listen very carefully to those words and make use of the words in that question in your answer. Okay, so it sounds very like a very conceptual, right? And very abstract, but let me give you an example. So this is actually the first question of a sample past year N-level or oral examination question. And before we actually tackle this question, I will actually have to show you the video first. So let me just show you the video first. And anyway, the first question is going to be, would you enjoy flying a kite like what you see in the video clip? Why or why not? Okay, so this is actually the video that was used. Yes, as I mentioned, the background, not music, the sound and all that, it is not so important, right? Sometimes it may add some difference to the video, but that's not the most important one. Okay, the most important is just observing generally what is happening in the video. Okay, just appreciate what you watch, get a rough idea. Maybe the first question might be like, would you want to do something like that? Okay, usually it's something very personal, right? Okay. Alright. So, yeah, very short video. So once you have watched the video already, you ask you the first question. So let me show you some sample answers. Like the one on the left, okay, it says, I've seen people fly kite in my void deck. Once there was this, da 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 da. Okay, read it for yourself. Now, and then the one on the right, which is supposed to be a bit better. Okay, it says, yes, I think I will enjoy flying a kite, da da da. Now, what makes the second response better is that actually the person make use of the words in the answer for the question. So candidates wouldn't be able to do this, right, if they don't listen intensely to the question that's being asked. So actually this is a very simple technique, but it's very powerful. So as a candidate, if you're just sitting there and just listening intently to the question, right, you can quickly recall and use those words in the question in your answer, right, and answer it directly. Don't go about the bush, right? Like this person over here. I mean, the examiner is asking you whether you enjoy flying a kite or not, and then you say, "I have seen people fly a kite." Don't do that. Answer the question directly, okay? And how you do that is to use what we call clever starter, or if it's easier for you to understand, just use the words from the question in your answer. Okay, and then the next thing that you notice is this, right? The question is asking the candidate, would you enjoy flying a kite? Like what you see in the video, would you enjoy flying a kite? Is obviously asking you like right now, or I mean not then in the examination hall, okay, but like presently, would you actually enjoy doing it? Okay, but you notice that the first response, the person says, once there was this primary school boy, going to us a long grandfather story, which is fine if it's relevant, but he's using a past tense. So that shows the examiners that this person didn't quite get the question in the first place. Whereas the second response, which is better, uses the present tense because the question is asking you about something in the present tense. Right? It is one of my favorite pastimes. So yes, I will enjoy. It is my favorite pastimes. You notice that this response is so good because it directly addresses the question. Right? Would you enjoy? Yes or no? Okay? And right, the question is asking why or why not, which is covered in this part. Whenever I'm flying a kite, I will feel so relaxed and happy. So obviously why I will enjoy flying a kite is because I'll feel relaxed and happy. So you notice this question, right? Actually there are two parts to it. It's supposed to be it is the first question, and usually the first question is the easiest, but because it is two parts, actually it's a little bit more difficult than a typical type of question. So important thing to note is this. You must know whether the question that's asked of you, is it one or two parts? And if it's two parts, make sure you address the second part. Don't forget about it. And make sure you address it directly. Okay? Give the explanation here. Second thing that the examiners will look out for is whether your focus is a bit overlap with the first one. Is really very much related to answering the question directly, but I'm just going to focus on whether you are focused on answering the question. Okay, same question, right? So let's look at the first one. The second one is a bit better. And you notice that this first response, right? The whole thing is all about something that happened in the past. Okay, whereas the question is actually asking you about whether you enjoy it now. So it's not focused in that sense, right? But if you look at the second response, it is very focused because the question asking you whether you enjoy it or not, and the person elaborates on whether they enjoy it, and then even illustrate why, and explain why they enjoy it. So if you look at this person's response, it says it is not difficult to pick up kite flying. Okay, maybe there's a reason why I enjoy it. It's so easy to manage. I remember it was during my lower sec school days. Now you notice that the past tense is used here, but it is okay over here. Alright, you can talk about long grandfather story, no problem. It is relevant because the reason why you enjoy it now is because of good memories back then. Okay, so it is relevant, right? So in that sense, arguably this could be relevant, but the person actually has to address the first part first, right? First part first. Oh, yep. So that's it. Okay, make sure you're focused on answering the question. And next one is to give specific details, right? Example for you. The specific details can be certain dates. I mean, of course, quite impossible for you to recall the date lah. I mean, if you've done something, I don't think you can recall the date unless it's really something phenomenal or momentous, right? Details can include the names of the places you're talking about, the people involved in whatever you're talking about. So this example question I'm giving you is the second question of the set of 3. Is that, tell me about a time when you felt happy and free doing an activity that you enjoyed. So let's look at the first response and the second response. Okay, just very quickly. Okay, I am a bit fast, but you can pause the video and read it for yourself, okay? So both have the same starting point, right? But the better one includes details. Friends, few hours straight, alright, to the point that I even, this person even forgot to have his meals. So the good thing is that the first one actually mentioned something specific, is something about Pokemon cards, okay, but the second one goes on to give more details. So that's what you want to do in an oral examination. Make sure you give details, specific details, names of places, names of people as well. So in this case, the second one, you can elaborate now. Who are these friends? They are my primary school friends or whoever it is, okay, so on and so forth. And because the question is about, tell me about time, alright, a particular time, right? Both are focused in talking about a particular time and not just saying, in general, I like playing Pokemon all the time. So this question is interesting because actually it's in the past. The first one just now is actually in the present, but the second one is actually in the past where you felt happy. So you wouldn't have known or have realized this if you didn't listen to the question intensely. So make sure you do that. Okay, moving right along. Always try to give examples. For example, this question here, how important is it for young people to be free to do what they like? Okay, why? So same thing, these two responses, they start out the same way, but the second one, okay, gives example, right? The first one talks about in general, like, you know, okay, it's important for young people to be free to do what they like. I don't know whether you agree. I believe you do agree with that. And then the person explains, right, why it's important, because if they are forced to do certain things, they will not be happy in life. This eventually affects them, other people. Some good pointers, but no examples. Whereas this one, it says, for example, some young people face a lot of pressure from their parents to be in certain professions. I don't know about you. Okay, I never face that, right? So anyway, maybe I'm blessed. Okay, and then says here, however, the profession may be something they like. In the end, these young people may become resentful towards their parents, or worse still, hate what they're doing. So very clearly showing an example to support what you're saying here, right? This comes with time and practice. So just in your mind, just know that you cannot give general statements. You have to try to support with examples. And what easier way to give examples by just starting with, for example? That is the easiest way. It cannot be any more easier than that, right? Okay, yeah, I know this lesson is really heavy, but it's important for you. And to be honest, there are other things that I could address, but these are key issues. So some key things that we have talked about for spoken interaction. Make sure you answer the question directly. Memorize the words in the question. Clever starter, use them. Stay focused, don't deviate and give details that are not relevant to the question. Okay, give specific details. You can name me the people you're talking about, the places, the dates even, or the time, or the day, and that kind of thing. Right, try to give examples in your response. Final tips. Okay, now before we go to final tips, let's just do a quick recap of what I've talked to you about. Right, so I've broken down paper 4 for you. Basically 2 parts, reading aloud, and then you have the video in the spoken interaction section. Okay, and then I've talked to you about what are some things that excuse me, your oral examiners will look out for the reading aloud as well as for the spoken interaction. Okay, final tips for reading aloud. Utilize, I would say, at most like 5 minutes for familiarization. Okay, maybe at most 6 minutes. Don't spend more than 6 minutes because you need time for the other section. Utilize the 5 minutes to familiarize yourself with the passage. In particular, try to practice reading a passage as many times as possible and as slowly as possible. A lot of times candidates are nervous. It is very normal. Okay. So they tend to read too quickly. That is the problem that many students and many candidates they encounter. They read too quickly. So always intentionally read much slowly, but not too slow. Okay, you know what I mean. What to do when you are nervous? Take deep breaths. Okay, take deep breaths to ease the nervousness. But of course, you can't do that in between reading lah. Okay, don't be ridiculous. Right? Once you start reading, you got to go through with it already. But of course, there are techniques, breathing techniques for you to calm yourselves even when you're reading, right? Such as taking quick breaths, right? But it sounds very weird if you do it, unskillfully. But before you read, take deep breaths. It really, really helps with the nervousness. Okay, before you start reading, right? But don't do it too loudly. I think it's quite funny. I can imagine examiners laughing to themselves when they look at a candidate breathing deeply and whatever. Spoken direction. Also utilize the time. Familiarize yourself with the video. Spoken direction. A lot of students think that they have to answer the questions right away, like there's some robot or some superb human being. Like the moment that the examiner stop the question, ask the question, and then 1 second later you have to answer it. Actually, it's not true. Many candidates have asked me during an actual N-level oral examination for time to think of the answer. Of course, it's permissible, alright? But not few hours, okay? So you can think for maybe like 10, 15, 20 seconds. At most 15 seconds. And then start speaking. So think of your answer, formulate your answer first. Keep in mind, clever starter, keep in mind, use the words in the question to start off your answer. That will really do you well, okay? And if the examiner ever prompts you right now, prompts you means they will follow up with what we call guiding questions or leading questions related to the question that original question they're asking you. Sometimes they do that because you may not have given enough details. They want to try to give you the best grade and the fairest grade that they can, for your ability to, so they will prompt you. Always pause to think before replying. Don't straight away say no. Right? It asks you, is there anything more you'd like to add? You don't straight away just say no. Think about it. If you need to maybe repeat certain things that you